I also want to know where else it's working in other markets. So are you really big in Scandinavia? Who's buying it in Scandinavia? I want to know if you're really good at the on-trade in certain countries. What have you done in those places to make it work? Why is it successful in these other places? Because obviously we know that the UK is not the same, but there will be some parallels that we can take learnings from.
That would be my biggest piece of advice: is you're selling yourself, you're selling your brand. When we're selling your brand to accounts, we're not emailing people. We're picking up the phone, or we're visiting, and we're building a face-to-face relationship. Pick up the phone and don't worry about the right time. If you're motivated and you want to get into the market, it doesn't matter when you're going to start that conversation. So my name's David. I run actually a spirit specialist importer called the Liana Collection. We typically specialize in smaller challenger categories outside of the mainstream, categories such as mezcal from Mexico, Calvados obviously from northern France, and categories we see great potential in. And I guess Sid wanted me on the call to maybe give a slightly different perspective away from a typical kind of wine importer, and I hopefully my insights into the things around the brands and businesses that are appealing to a spirits importer that we can hopefully have some some similarities for the wine world. So hopefully I can give a slightly different perspective.
Absolutely, David. Thank you. Francis, please.
Hi, my name is Frances Bentley. I'm a wine buyer at LWC Drinks. We're based in the north of England, but we have depots throughout the UK. So we now have 18 depots. So the idea is that we give a national coverage with a local feel. So all of the depots are run locally. They have their own telesales team, etc. We are a composite wholesaler, so our approach will be different to a wine specialist. But the idea is that we are a one-stop shop for the customers that we have, and that's an increasingly important space in terms of wholesale as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to having a chat about how we approach the market with the suppliers we have as well.
Amazing. Michael?
We're a 40-year-old family business. We have a wide range. We started by importing just Australian wines, but over the decades, through either acquisition or addition of other producers, we now have a very comprehensive range of wines from most wine producing countries. Traditionally we focused on the independent trade, having had a very large brand with the supermarkets and finding that was that was all encompassing, and we decided to change our direction about 20 years ago and purchased another another national wholesaler importer. So we focus on selling to regional independents and specialist independent retailers and regional wholesalers. But slowly, with the changes of the trade, we've sort of slowly drifted back selectively to selling to the multiples. But so we're basically an agency house. Very traditional. We don't sell to the on-trade at all. We don't sell to our customers, and we have a fairly full portfolio.
I think solid, little different dynamics, if you can see here, from the biggest wholesaler of the country to boutique, agencies, spirits distributors, to a niche category importer. So the idea was to really have a diversification sort of panel here so we can hear from everyone. Let's start with a little bit on trends in the consumer behaviors, folks, right? So I think we can follow the same order for answering for now. On the trends, so I want to know, please, what categories you are seeing where there are opportunities or are growing in the UK market when it comes to wine, let's say, and consumer behavior. If you see maybe premium category is still hot, or maybe it's time for value wines again. So just throw your light on the price, the consumer behavior, and the category.
So bearing in mind that we are a specialist importer, so obviously I can talk about my sector of the market, kind of medium to top end. Trends that we are seeing that there, and also bearing in mind that we are specialists in South America, are more towards the quirky styles of wine. So, for instance, orange wines have been really, really popular, something that 10 years ago we wouldn't thinking kind of selling is being one of the categories that has grown the most for us in the last, say, 2 to 3 years. And we keep adding more and more wines along these lines, and we don't seem to have enough. So definitely for us, growing demand there. Then in terms of sustainability, that is also hugely important. So we have our customers, and by that I mean buyers at restaurants or some small shops. They're more concerned about the origin of the wines, whether there are any sustainability credentials, the weight of the bottles, that's really important. So if we stop importing bottles over certain weight, for instance, because our customers do not want them anymore. And personally, also, I'm really keen in supporting that trend. I think it's important that we take responsibility as importers, even if the final customer perhaps isn't fully aware of that or embraces this yet. I think we need to take that like a step forward within that role. And then stylistically, we've seen a shift towards less and less oaky wines. So heavily oak wines, definitely, we don't really have that much demand anymore. Freshness, lighter styles, that's what our customers are kind of asking for. In terms of price points, again, we work with mid to top end sector of the market, but given the current climate, economic climate in the UK, offering good value at all price points, that is really, really important. So pre-COVID, we were selling wines at any price point really easily, even really expensive wines. Now, even at the very top end of the market, that has become a little bit trickier. And we need to be able to offer really, really good value at all price points.
I guess from my side, I'll focus on trends I'm seeing in the on-trade. And I think one thing that Carla picked out there, which I'm seeing massively in spirits, is a focus on the origin of the product and the sustainable credentials. I think one of the great things about COVID was consumers were able to deep dive into brands and understand how things were made. And, we as a, combined with the issues with global instability around global warming, etc., sustainability is huge. What we're seeing is that as one trend, one trend in spirits, which is really interesting for the wine world to take a look at. And I'd love to know more about if this is already something that's happening, is larger formats, trying to take as much glass out of the supply chain as possible. And not just on mainline spirits, so your house gins or your house rums or whiskies. We're seeing our vermouth brand, Regal Rogue, which is an organic Australian wine base. They've moved about 30% of all of their on-trade business to bag-in-box, taking out thousands of bottles of glass from the supply chain. And that's definitely a trend we're seeing. In terms of the sectors that are interesting, the premium end of the on-trade markets, where we're seeing probably the best place to be in the market. There's no middle market anymore. There's a premium end and there's a value end. The value end is about volume and smaller margins, and I personally think that's quite a dangerous place to be. The premium end is there because it's a lot more expensive than it used to be to go and have a meal out, and people are prepared to spend the money as long as they get a fantastic experience. People are going to go out less, spend more money, and as a result, you as an operator, you need to deliver brilliant products, be those spirits or wine. So, very good quality, still well priced, premium position brands that are sustainable. That seems to be a very big trend at the moment.
So I think that there's a number of key things here. I think that, yes, there's these broader trends. There's things like sustainability, but there's also no and low. I think no and low's grown a lot in the last year, especially with the changes in juicy. So we're seeing pressure from people wanting to drop their ABVs, which is understandable. And I think that's driven, I think it would have been nice to see that driven by consumer choice, but if it's been driven by government policy, and I think that's also impacted in things like beer and spirits as well. We are also seeing things like alternative packaging, which we've touched on being a big thing, not just for sustainability, but for convenience. Wow. And that's especially in things like the festival market, which is increasingly important, but also events and so on. I think the growth of wine in cans has been driven not just by the ability to recycle them, but there's a practical benefit there because they do chill in a faster time than conventional glass. The convenience of having a single serve, there's all these sorts of things that are helping create new markets. And I think a lot of people who may have been drinking beer or spirits or however are finding that that convenience of wine is helping recruit new drinkers. The other things that we're seeing are sort of more micro trends, so things like the growth of Greece, Romania. I'm finding that there's more interest in the diversity of quite classic regions, so France and so on. We're seeing an increase in what we're selling in France, the diversity there. The same with Italy. I'm also seeing a greater diversity in the types of sparkling wine that we're selling. So different types of Prosecco, different types of French sparkling as well. So that there's all these micro trends that I think are feeding into these broader trends around sustainability, organics, vegan, that sort of thing as well.
Just one question on the ABV. I think there was some tax structural change, right? So 8 to 10% was a little sweet spot. Something was happening there where, so could you just elaborate on that?
There's been a change in how duty was charged. So it used to be the fact that if it was a sparkling wine, you were paying more duty than for still. It's now just about the level of alcohol that's in the product, and it's graduated. So there's certain steps where you pay a lower rate of duty. So for example, maybe like 11% now at the moment is charged at a different rate. In February, it's proposed that this will be another change in duty. So it'll be graduated in terms of 0.5%, or so for wine, you would pay a different rate at 11.5 to what you would at 11. So that's what's proposed for February. But with a change in government, I think it's possible that might change again, but we'll see. But there's a huge amount of text that's been written about this already, and the WSTA website has a huge amount of information that I would recommend that people read and digest on this subject.
Well, I think it's very difficult to look at trends in our sector because so much, and when you consider how much is sold through the multiple sector, you know a lot of it is anecdotal experience in our sector because we read about trends that are happening in the supermarkets, and it bears little relevance to our side of the business. We're really niche, you know, in a lot of our products. But I echo what Francis said. I mean, the low and no has grown a lot in the last year. And I think that the tax changes are driving the trade to look at lower alcohol wines to try and keep prices down. But, you know, I think that we're seeing that people, you know, the statistics are that less people are drinking wine. Younger people are not engaging in wine as much as they used to. They're drinking less alcohol, and where they choose to drink alcohol, the you know, wine is not the choice as it used to be. And I think it's very difficult. The wine trade has been a very traditional trade and hasn't kept up with changes in demands and hasn't been as innovative as spirits and beer. And I think the wine trade needs to do more of that and listen to what consumers want. But in terms of different countries, you know, I think because we deal in the independent sector so much, the independent sector can drive the demand and advise consumers, whereas unfortunately, where you've got the on-trade, I think generally in the UK, the very large companies who have been in command of supplying so much of the on-trade over the years have been responsible. I mean, they've driven prices down. There's a lot of very large companies making no profit at all, but just driving turnover. So the experience for the consumer is pretty average wine. And that is turning a lot of people off wine. The number of young people that I give wine to, and they say, wow, that's amazing, I don't like wine. And what they don't like is what they've been offered, because, you know, their experience is meeting wines at very low end of the scale. And It's I think that needs to change, and we need to be driven more by quality. But there is a strong demand for quality, as people have said.
Yeah, so I'm David from Rayburn Fine Wines. We have like an on-trade focus, and we import maybe 250 producers a year, plus let's say top end of Bordeaux. So maybe 400 producers we actively work with on the portfolio. So it's like a big portfolio, maybe 5,000 plus lines on the list. And at least well over half of the wineries we work with are now in certification schemes of organics, biodynamics, or sustainability. That's a big focus for us and for our producers. And I'm looking to grow that and looking to cut out people who are not interested in that sort of pathway for the future. I'm not particularly necessarily good at UK trends, and I think as we've just heard, there is a big difference between the macro side driven by supermarkets, and then the small artisan winery stroke small independent restaurant. That's just a whole other category. With growth, like we've heard about, less oaky wines, lower alcohol wines, more freshness, that kind of 90s party era idea of monolithic, extracted, high alcohol, acidified wines with a lot of cheap French new oak. That's a thing of the past as far as I'm concerned. I now view that as being a heritage concept. I think we've seen champagne creep up quite a bit in price. A lot of confidence from some big brands, and a lot of smaller houses have followed. I think that's a really interesting sweet spot for Pet Nat from the funkier side of wine, and then Method Tradicional from Spain, whether it's called Cava or not called Cava. I think there's a great opportunity for Cava right now. I think we're seeing Prosecco waning a bit, but then Franciacorta has never really got a foothold in the UK, so it's important in Italy. But I think because the prices seem to be somehow pegged to champagne, Franciacorta doesn't seem to be able to capitalize on occupying the space that champagne once occupied. But there is scope there. It's amazing how, obviously huge points from certain critics can really make wines fly, but equally Instagram from somebody important anywhere in the world can make wine fly. So that's really interesting. I've seen it happen recently, a wine that is brand new, first wine bottled last autumn, first released this spring, and someone in Germany put it on their Instagram page, and then we get huge demand in the UK for it like the next day. Wow. And I don't think I'd see that kind of thing happen, but it's happening. So it's not to be ignored. And as far as environment goes, as well as the farming and the certification side, I'm really into materials. So looking at lightweighting glass, closure for like total quality control or quality assurance. If you use top quality tested fault-free closures, you can deliver wine to the market where every bottle's the same. There's no variation, let alone faults. And getting rid of faults from the system, you get rid of the 1, 2, 3% of faults. That's a huge saving of carbon, a huge saving of time and energy. I'd much rather be talking to clients about wine than about issues and problems. And a lot of wineries just stick with traditional one-piece natural cork. I mean, yes, there are great wines bottled under one-piece natural cork, but it's a totally flawed concept. And even enhanced cleaning and enhanced testing doesn't get rid of all the problems of one-piece natural cork. So I don't really want to see them, especially as there are so many great alternatives now. Whether top micro aglos or other things. But you're getting rid of plastic tape from boxes, which has 1,000-year half-life if it biodegrades at all, and going for the new top-end paper tapes. That's really exciting. Or just boxes that self-seal themselves, or copper staples. But I don't want to see plastic tape anymore. And I don't want to see single-use plastics. And I think one of the things that we haven't got around to talking about yet in the wine world is the fact that all labels and champagne capsules are polylaminate, so they're metal and plastic or paper and plastic, and so it's a nightmare for recyclers. So all those champagne foils can't be recycled, and we're now hearing champagne houses talking about going into pure metal foils for the first time in in living memory. But I'd much rather see labels that float off in an ice bucket like in the old days, and labels that can be recycled in paper recycling. In wine, it takes so long for people to plant vineyards and develop wines and get them ready for the market and release them. I've known wineries who are on a 15, 20-year time span from conceiving a wine to releasing the first vintage. Okay, that's a bit excessive, but it takes so long to reconfigure vineyards and make wine that we have to be having these conversations now with producers in order to get out of the doldrums of just continuing with the status quo of how wine is produced and made, to then get new wines onto the marketplace. and lead agriculture rather than dragging behind along with all the other forms of agriculture that underperform. So in humid regions, I don't really want to see Vitis vinifera, being continually planted. I want to see disease-resistant varieties, whether we call them peewees or resdure, or I think DRVs is catchy enough. I'll go with that. But just stop using standard heritage Vitis vinifera unless you're in a major heritage region, or you can offset or inset your carbon choices from farming Vitis vinifera. I just want to see DRVs and branded wine of the future. And there's, yes, there are some disease-resistant regions like the south of France, maybe, or parts of California, or La Mancha in Spain, where there isn't mildew or botrytis because there's not much humidity, and so you don't have to spray. So you don't have to choose organic treatment by carbon compaction of spraying copper and sulfur, or you don't have to be full chemical. So in places where there's no disease, wow, carry on with your Vitis vinifera. But in the humid regions, of which there are many famous examples, Britain being one, planting classic Vitis vinifera is just, for me, a complete waste of time, because you're killing your soil, and you're by compaction and by spraying, whether organic spraying or chemical spraying, and so you are not sequestering carbon. And I see that's one of our ambitions in agriculture and viticulture. We should be sequestering carbon, looking after our soils, and then secondarily taking grapes as a cash crop and selling wine. And that is the great potential and the great trend of the future for wine.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So I think we're hearing very nice and clear here: sustainability, carbon footprints, premium, ultra premium is still there, and the values. The odd bins is gone, as we can see in the testimony. So the middle tier is suffering. So I'm just recapping what you guys are saying. I think personally, I always admire UK being the setting stone for the global sort of trends. We've seen even in US, that follows, that culture comes, you learn from UK, London especially sets the cocktail market, the wine market, the consumer behavior market. So my second question is on the business side of things, right? So let's say, you're in a meeting with the supplier. What kind of things, apart from everything that you've said, right? The sustainability, the showing the carbon footprint, but talk to me about marketing support or education of the supplier, or what other factors do you consider in making a decision for a brand that you would be adding in a portfolio? And this is a basic question for even, a spirits wholesaler. Let's say, when you're saying yes to a supplier, apart from all these things that you've said, what other things do you look for?
It's really important that the supplier understands our business, and I want them to have done some research in LWC and who we are and what sort of a business we are. We are a family firm. It's still owned by two guys, and it's changed a lot. It's grown a lot in the past 10 years. I want them to have an understanding of the UK on-trade and how they want to support us and what their aspirations are. I need to understand them as well. I need to understand what they want from us as a supplier, because there's lots of suppliers out there. Why is it important that they want to work with LWC? What is it about us that interests them? Because we don't see them just as suppliers. They have to become a partner. It has to be a two-way thing. We have a big sales force. I want to know how they plan to engage the sales force and how they will essentially go out and recruit customers for LWC, because I want to see them acting almost like a salesman for us as a company as well. That's how I would envisage it working well. It has to solve a problem in the business. It has to add something. I won't list stuff just for the sake of it, because then it won't move through. That's taking up space in the warehouse. That's taking up a product line. I want to make sure that it's actually something that we need. So it does help if somebody's actually done some research and says, I understand that you don't have this, and this is the reason why I think it's going to bring something and enhance your business in these ways. It's increasingly important to our customers. We touched on the sustainability. We're now working with some wineries who are B Corp certified, which I know is a really difficult thing to undertake, and it's very expensive, but things like that really do help. And especially when we're working with people like the public sector, part of the UK trade, things like that add a lot, and it makes it much easier for us to go, okay, well, there's something here. There's a point of difference that really means that it adds something really positive and exciting to our portfolio. I also want really good stories. I want the guys to be our sales team to be able to go out and talk about these wines in a really positive way to the customers. It's creating new opportunities for sales. So if this new wine has a really good story, you know, if they've been into a venue a bunch of times and they've said, oh, not now, you know, not come back. If they can go in with a brand new story that really engages them, I think that really helps. That's a positive thing. In terms of marketing and stuff like that, look, it's helpful if they're good at that, but we are good at that ourselves, and we will help wineries to promote themselves in the UK using our marketing team. But it varies, you know, it's dependent on who the winery is, it depends on their size and their scale and how much support they would need from us in order to gain listings in the UK.
I think that would be quite a nice follow-up to Francis.
Yes, please, David.
LWC are a bigger national business, whereas my company, the Liana Collection, we're a much more bespoke, smaller distributor. And I think one of Francis's great points there was understanding the distributor and the unique selling points and why the fit together is so good. And I think for us, where we have success are in those smaller categories. And if kind of an emerging, let's say an aperitif brand or an Amaro brand from Italy wants to come in and crack the market, there are plenty of options on the table for them. One of those options would be to go to somebody like Francis and LWC or a regional importer in the world of spirits would be somebody like Mangrove or Proof Drinks, who have big national sales teams. The other option is to go with a Liana Collection, who are far more bespoke, focused on curating a very, very small portfolio, and getting that relationship right based on your business and your brand and your category. Getting that fit is obviously very, very, very important. The other thing is, I think that's really important for brands to understand is managing their expectations in a post-COVID and post-Brexit world in the UK. This market used to be incredibly lucrative and incredibly exciting as a young spirits brand who could see an exit to Diageo or Pernod, and I'm sure same in the wine world, seeing the great kind of modern day wine brands that are being created with things like Whispering Angel, for example. My opinion is that the opportunities are less than they used to be for an exit, and actually brands are probably better set looking at a far more sustainable business model that isn't necessarily built around selling their brand. It's more about creating a profitable long-term business, and there's suddenly brands and businesses that I'm more attracted to nowadays, as opposed to huge initial investment, potentially not hitting the numbers that need to be hit, and an inevitable failure down the line. Like if a young aspirational entrepreneur is looking to start a spirits brand today or a wine brand, my opinion would be create a business model that's long-term and sustainable. And the other thing on Brexit is the expense to the distributor now is a lot higher than it used to be. And that's both in money and in time. Importing a brand from Europe was, once upon a time, pre-Brexit, would take, if everything was ready and packed properly, you could have your product delivered into our bonded warehouse and able to fulfill orders within two weeks. And realistically, particularly peak season now, that can take up to six to 8 weeks, maybe more at Christmas. So one of the things that you have to consider when coming to this market is making the distributor's life financially as easy as possible. And the old days of 30-day payment terms on order, those are the kind of things that you need to start thinking about. And I would recommend, if you are able to facilitate it, starting to look at some kind of consignment deal with your distributor and put that on the table, because it's very appealing as a distributor if you're able to pay for the stock that you've sold that week or that month. It's a lot easier on cash flow, and the market in its current state, I would say cash is king at the moment. So I think making the distributor's life as easy as possible by being forward thinking with your financial planning and making it easier for the distributor to say yes is definitely a consideration for brands.
Linking with what Francis said earlier about doing your research before, well, when you approach a new potential customer importer, I'm sure we all get tons of emails every day with the dear sirs, we are blah 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 from providing that I get to read those and they don't get to go to my spam folder. Most of the times I get things like we are specialists in South America, and I get people from Australia trying to sell me wine and so on, which is really annoying. Then eventually they do find my name, and I get a little bit more targeted email. But again, with no research behind, you can tell when someone has done a little bit of work, and all of that is a waste of time. Nobody's going to pay attention to a blank email that kind of lands randomly in your inbox. If you use whichever money you spend in buying that contact list, if you use the same amount of money in actually targeting those emails to real businesses that you understand before reaching out, then you have a lot more chances that someone will actually pay attention and say, oh, look, they actually took the time in finding out who we are. I mean, we do that when we sell ourselves. So it's kind of such a basic thing, but it seems to be kind of non-existent from the marketing strategy sometimes of some of the producers. And targeting the content of that email to that specific company rather than a blank thing, which you can tell when someone sends the same to absolutely everyone. So those little things do make a difference in a world that is hugely competitive. There are thousands and thousands of producers trying to sell their wine, and there is a lot of really good wine everywhere. So having attention to detail, it really makes a difference from the very beginning. And that attention to detail, reflects on everything. Reflects on your labels, for instance, reflects on your website. So the first thing that I do is someone kind of say, okay, well, this looks interesting. I go and look at their website. And sometimes they're really, really bad. They have no information. I don't know. So that kind of puts me off. Things like that, to have branding is really important for us too. So a producer that understands having a range as opposed to sometimes, you see ranges where each wine is so detached from the other in terms of branding, labels, it makes no sense. So then you think, how am I going to sell this? What's the story? And again, linking what other people have said before, stories are really important. So not just, yes, okay, we are in an amazing place with an amazing climate and amazing soil. Yeah, everyone says the same. So with the amazing climate and the amazing micro terroir and all of that, there's a lot. There needs to be a little bit more than that. The people are really important, especially for a small business like us. We tell stories of people. We connect a producer, a person with the final customer. So those kind of stories are really important. So financial terms, what David was saying, for a small business, that also, especially in this climate, makes a huge difference. So to work with the distributor and being flexible, it takes a long time to introduce a new brand to the market. So not just contributing with samples, for instance, but with extended payment terms for those first shipments where that by the time that, it takes us 30 days to bring wine from South America, if we are lucky, that's the transit time. But then obviously you place the order a month before, so it's a bit 2 months between you place the order and the wine arrives here, and then it takes another 2 to 3 months to start selling that wine. And by the time that you sold and cashed that wine, it could be 6, 7, 8 months. So, for a small business, for a small importer, that is a really long period of time. If we have to, for instance, pay in advance or at 30 days, it makes no sense. So working with the importer and being flexible with that also makes a huge difference, and enter a partnership in essentially. So we're working together both ways, which is also what Francis was saying before. So I think those for me are key elements when looking at a new supplier, as well as, of course, the obvious that we need to have a need for that product, right? For that specific line, for that specific whatever. So I think that kind of summarizes my view.
Great stuff. Michael?
Yeah, I think a lot has already been said. But I think, David from Rayburn, all that he said, I echo that immensely. The sustainability and the long-term view of the producer. But we tend to work with family producers, and we have done traditionally, and that has been inbuilt in most of them, because most family-run businesses, where they're generational, already have a sort of best practice, and they adopt new ideas and go with try and be do things in the best possible way for the sustainability of the wine industry. But first and foremost, I mean, obviously quality is the first thing that attracts us to a new producer, but then they have to understand that we're not the customer, because we're an agency house. I always say to producers, please don't view me as the customer. You've sold me a.
So, Michael, why don't you break it down? What does an agency house mean?
Well, we are basically we are the extension of their sales team. I mean, a lot of producers start selling in their own country. A debate here where I have a fundamental sort of principle that I don't believe that you can necessarily, on a small scale, yes.
So you are representing the producers, right? You are helping them grow the market.
And rather, if you are selling to restaurants, for instance, if you're selling to the on-trade, your key, in my view, is that you are forward facing and you're acting for the restaurants, and you should be delivering to them the best possible range of wines. And if they have a hailstorm in Chablis, you say, don't buy Chablis this year, it's got to be too expensive, switch to somewhere else. Or if the South African currency has gone the wrong way, you say, not good value this year. You can't do that as an agency house. As an agency house, we've got to sell wines for our producers through thick and thin. So in the first instance, you have to choose someone that's going to be continue to produce good wines on a long-term basis. So that's the most important thing we look for, is somebody who will deliver it every year. But they have to realize we're not the customer. We are the conduit to the customer, and we allow our producers to form relationships and get their story across to the customer base, whether it be independent retailers or even the restaurants through our regional distributors who sell to restaurants. So we're here battling for them. So please don't think of us as the customer and you've sold us the wine and, that's it. Right. Can you sell some more, please? They have to understand the market. It's like a marriage. We've got to understand, what their long-term aims are. A few people will approach it on an opportunistic basis, but we prefer to look at people on a long term. And where do you want to be in 1, 3, 5 years? How do you want to build your business? Where do you want your wine sold? And then they have to engage with our sales team. We have a middle-sized sales team. There's covering the whole country, so they have to engage with them. And without our sales team being fully on board with the products we sell, that we have a large portfolio. We deal with some 90 producers. The producer has to engage with the salesperson to get them to remember to sell their wines and love them. There are so many good wines. And that's the other good thing about working with family businesses. The story is genuine. It's really there. On the negative side, some of them are too small and they simply don't have the economy of scale. They produce wonderful wine, but they charge too much for it, and because they only produce a small amount. So you've got to strike the middle ground where people have the correct economies of scale and produce wines on an ongoing basis. In terms of the approach, as I think it was Carla said, we get I hate not answering emails, but if someone says, "Dear Sir," or "Dear Fred," and Fred left our company 10 years ago, then it just gets consigned to the bin. But if they write to me personally and have a plausible email that doesn't go on for page after page telling us how wonderful they are, I try and always respond. And unfortunately, the market, the message at the moment is that the UK market is very oversubscribed. There's too many products in the market. There's been a lot of fragmentation. The traditional method of selling in the UK had to change, where it was the importer would sell to, now everybody wants to import. And, some of our independent retailers, they're tiny, but they'll ship in a pallet of Chateauneuf-du-Pape and have it in the warehouse for a year. And you think, how can that be economical? Oh, I've saved, €3 a bottle by doing that, but it's cost them 4. So the wine trade is very difficult, and it's very multi-layered in the UK, not like the United States, and I suppose even that's breaking down, isn't it? Where you have the three-step distribution.
I think it's just leaping into the same conversation, and maybe David, Harvey, you can close this. So we are hearing, partnership supports. We all understand that, and I like to break it down between what LWC kind of distributor would look for and what a boutique wholesaler. So we are hearing terms, finance, because cash flow is maybe the most important thing, but maybe for LWC, it's not the cash flow. Maybe it's like, you open the doors for me, you bring in the new customers, right? So you got to figure out what is the most important thing for them, and then sort of play that. David, you are a classic middle to sort of large distributor. So what would you look for, especially when it comes to one or two things where, all right, wow, here, let me hear you out.
Yeah, and it's going to be quality in the glass, and as well as just quality, which is what Michael was talking about, over delivery. So for the cost price of the product, you want a wine that is rocking for that price. And there's lots of wines that taste good and the price is okay. You go, wow, the world is full of that stuff. No one needs more of it. When wines are really thrilling in the glass, okay, we can get our teeth into that. We can work with that. Our customers will get excited by it. It'll look good in the tasting. They'll taste great on the table, which is what the other David was talking about at the premium end of the market. Yes, wine costs more now than it did before Brexit and before COVID and before 2008. So when you have a bottle of wine on a table at 50, 80, £100 or whatever the price point is, people open it and go, wow, that is the desired experience. And a lot of wineries, wow. So I think a lot of wineries got totally obsessed about the triple mono wine style, which is single grape, single terroir, single vintage, even if that small micro vinification and micro bottling is a totally incomplete, uninteresting wine. A lot of wineries think that expressing the potential of their terroir is the be all and end all of wine. And the end market doesn't care about that at all. Outside of wine geeks, the end market wants good wine for the price.
Sorry to break a little bit because we'll have to go in the Q&A, but I want to add some more like concrete to it, right? So give me takes on what kind of are you looking for when someone is presenting? Like, I'm pre-approved in Tesco, I have a pre-buyer, this 5 bars are going to buy, this is my report in Germany, we are top 5, this is how we've done in Manchester, now I want to move to London, so give me some data points that you're going to pay attention and going to raise your eyebrows.
We access CGA data. It's an important thing for us to look at because our business is a complex one. It's a large one. And we sell a huge amount of different products. Look, I take it as read that the wines that we provide are good. Like I'm not going to list anything that I don't believe in and I don't believe is relevant to the customers that we have in the trade. I don't necessarily need data points. What I need to have demonstrated is that this is a good wine, as we've discussed, for the money that we're paying. I also need to feel that we're going to sell enough of it to make it worth our while and their while. So I need to know things like all the basics, like your minimum order. I also want to know where else it's working in other markets. So are you really big in Scandinavia? Who's buying it in Scandinavia? I want to know if you're really good at the on-trade in certain countries. What have you done in those places to make it work? Why is it successful in these other places? Because obviously we know that the UK is not the same, but there will be some parallels that we can take learnings from. I always like it when people have shown, can demonstrate success elsewhere. It's not as important that it works in grocery. We're not in grocers. And I just like it when somebody's actually thought about our trade at all and hasn't just gone, here's a presentation I've shown to 1,000 of the folk. I've just put an LWC logo in there. As Carla was saying, I do like it when they get my gender right in emails. That's normally a good sign. You can normally Google me and find that I'm not a mister. That's quite helpful. It's taking care to have understood anything about the UK market. and demonstrating how you can support us, because as we've all said here, the trade is tough. It has to add something. If you can say, look, we've looked at CGA data for the UK market, and here is why this is going to help your business. Just even if I'm not entirely convinced, the fact that you're making these comparisons or trying to draw these points out shows me that you've put some effort in, as opposed to, as Carla has said, just sending a deck that what's going to make me open this deck and get excited about it. I think that, as I've said, it's really important. If you've got examples of success elsewhere, then then that should tell us something about how we can replicate that.
Yeah, I think that's very good. I agree. But it depends on the price point. I mean, I think at the fine wine end that's less relevant, but in the lower price brackets that is essential. But you look at something, for instance, I found something at Vinexpo Hong Kong the other day that it was a 16% wine that was peach, mango, and strawberry flavored and infused. And they're selling 250,000 cases a month in America.
Wow.
So, but I don't think that necessarily, because that's worked, I don't think that would transpose over here. Well, I hope it won't anyway. But anyway, it goes against all the trends that young people are drinking less alcohol and and drinking better. Well, really, But yes, I think it's essential to have the split between the fine wine and it's less relevant how well it's done. I think people have to realize also through expectation. I mean, the on-trade is, if you're selling into the on-trade, and Francis probably knows this more than anyone. You have such a large range from the entry level right up to fine wine. But when a €9 wine will be on London restaurant lists at something like £75, that amazes producers sometimes when you give them that statistic. And then you think, well, the on-trade are taking all the margin here. Well, when a little restaurant's electricity bill is 160,000 a year, or a mid-range restaurant, you think, well, they have to make that sort of margin on wine because, and that's so good wines in restaurants will cost a lot of money, and therefore people, where the economy is at the moment, people are cutting down. And to spend over 60, £70, that's a thin. And the other thing to remember is that the wine trade exploded in the 80s here, and it was only 5% of people in the market drank wine, and I guess that's not that much different to people who now drink fine wine. And where would you draw the line at fine wine? Are we talking over £15 retail or over £20 retail? It's a rarefied part of the market. So you have to exclude so much wine that's sold in the UK if your wine is going to be, over that price, and your expectation has to be tailored for that.
We're going to do some rapid round here. So I've collected questions from the people who are attending or who wanted answers on. What is the best time to pitch for the new product to the importer or distributor?
Distributors are always looking at the market, so I don't think there's a good time. The way to pitch a producer, and this was something just on an earlier point on addressing emails. Much like Michael, I probably have 10 to 20 brands a week email in some degree of commitment. In the last 3 years, I reckon maybe 5 people have taken the time to pick up the phone and have a conversation. And that would be my biggest piece of advice: is you're selling yourself, you're selling your brand. When we're selling your brand to accounts, we're not emailing people. We're picking up the phone, or we're visiting, and we're building a face-to-face relationship. Pick up the phone and don't worry about the right time. If you're motivated and you want to get into the market, it doesn't matter when you're going to start that conversation, and try and make that conversation as personable as possible. And the easiest thing to do is find the person's mobile, which is very easy to do nowadays, and give them a direct call as well as the email.
That's a very good one then. Yeah. So the second question is, how much do you think wine writers or critics or magazines influence in your purchasing decisions? If there is a story, like if there's a story that comes in Harper's or Drinks Business or anything like that, would you can that be used as an angle to get your attention?
I think, the dream, really, wine merchants should be the critics. They should be, if you want to make your reputation as a wine merchant, you should be discovering wines that are exceptional without the critics. But unfortunately, they do make. I had an instance where we had a wine from Australia that we knew was fabulous, and we approached one of the very big brokers in London who refused to take it. They said, "No, we don't need that," until Jancis gave it 20 points, and they immediately were on the phone saying they wanted it. And I said, well, you've got hundreds of years of reputation where you should be buying this wine, not waiting for the critics to write about it. And I think that a lot of the very top merchants have lost their credibility by following critics too much. But not generally, but I think that's the trade has to go back to being, build your reputation on your products without the critics' choice, is my view.
Anyone else want to say anything here?
For us, they are useful to a point, but then, in my experience, when you are with a really kind of top end sector of the market, certain buyers or sommeliers are like, I don't really need someone else's reassurance or scores. I can taste for myself. I can make the decision and judge. And they sometimes are even offended if you point out, oh, this had, I don't know, so much points from so and so. So we take it quite cautiously. So it's on our price list, but we don't kind of really enforce that, because sometimes we've...
you're putting it out there. You're not saying
Exactly.
It's a passive thing. Yeah,
that's right.
It's a reaffirmation sort of approach. Yep. Francis, you had something to say?
We submitted quite a lot of wines to the Sommelier Wine Awards this year, because the Sommelier Wine Awards is on trade focused. But we take a view that most of our customers, so the people who are drinking our wines in venues, don't necessarily care about what a critic has to say. And I think the wine trade, as we all probably know, is quite bad at talking to itself and not really to consumers. I think the Sommelier Wine Awards has been good, as your competition is as well, because it has this on-trade focus. It's more relevant to the venues. It's more targeted in the way that it engages with people. And I think because it's done by people in the industry for the industry, I think they have a different tone. In terms of the traditional wine writers, it's nice to know when they reconfirm something that you believed in your heart, but I don't think that the consumers that we have necessarily go out and read Jancis or read Matthew Jukes or whoever. I think that the people who end up drinking the product at the end of the day are more reliant on what they've drunk in the past or familiarity and things like that. But the venues that we sell to, I think do pay attention to some of these things. So it's important to know about them. It's important to be aware of them and consider them. But it doesn't really change how we buy.
All right. So next question is, what are your views on discounting? For example, I'll just break it down into, let's say if I'm pitching you for the first pilot, I'll say, all right, first month when we're knocking doors, let's give everyone 1 on 5, or let's just go heavy in launching this product, or maybe launch slow and then we'll rebuild. What's your take on having a discounting strategy to build a brand?
In Scotland, it's illegal, which is worth noting. So you can't do that. And I think for top-end wineries, it's not a good look.
So just to clarify, in UK, I'm just comparing this for the people who don't know much about UK market. So if you just gave on an invoice like 1 case of sample and 5 cases at £80 a case, that's illegal, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
In Scotland, yeah. And in England, you can do. But I think for top-end wineries, it's not a good route. People want to buy on quality, and the price should be right. If the price is like too high for the quality and tone deaf, then that just offends buyers. So it's good to start. Like, I agree with starting at a sensible price, capture market demand, get people interested, get people working with the wine. Step 1, get busy. Step 2, get more profitable. So it's good, starting at the right price and look to build it up if that's the plan. But launching high is not good. If you launch too low or discount, it feels...
So let's say if your retailer is telling you that, hey, you sold me 5 cases and start moving, David, what are you going to do? Like, can you tell them that, hey, instead of £7.99, put it at £6.99 and I'll take care of whatever it is? Or how do we, for a stuck product that's not moving, what do you do?
I think a lot of independent retailers are buying like three bottles, 6 bottle, 12 bottles, maybe max, outside of big volume lines, and buy what they need and trickle through it. I wouldn't suggest that small independent retailers buy like five
Understood.
packs of anything unless they know they're going to move it. I prefer to get that conversation right at the beginning rather than after the fact.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so getting a retailer. And that's obviously if you've got visiting principals and you have a winemaker who wants to go out and meet and greet, getting the sales team in a retailer or the som team in a restaurant to know the product, great. Otherwise that's what our sales team would do. But I think leading with product knowledge is a great way.
On the international fairs, I think like Imbibe or London Wine Fair or anything like that, how do you recommend, or can they use these fairs? Do you think it's still a good use of these fairs to meet people like you?
We use Wine Paris increasingly now, which I think is a really great fair. We still go to Pro Wine, and I think it's quite nice the way that you can now use them. I can get a lot of my European business done at Wine Paris, and then when I go to Pro Wine, I focus more on the New World and the rest of the world, and that works really well now because Pro Wine was getting so big and so busy and difficult that I actually think that they work really well in tandem. The UK wine fairs, I normally go every year to the London Wine Fair. I wasn't there this year because I was on holiday. I'm disappointed that it's not as good as it was, but I do feel like it's kind of lost its way as to who it's for. And I do want it to. I think it's really important that London has a great wine fair. I don't know. I don't know what that will look like. I think it needs to be much more geared towards the on trade. I feel that sometimes it's a bit more geared to retail. But we do have things like the Northern Restaurant and Bar Show as well, which we support and we have done for a long time. So I do recommend looking at things like that, where it's not just about wine. They do it's point of sale. There's grocers there. There's beers. There's spirits. There's all sorts. But that has it's kind of imbibey, but there's a bit more targeted business towards the on trade. And I don't know if channels splitting it like that is the right thing. But I do think that the London Wine Fair needs to reimagine what it wants and who it's for. Otherwise, I'm worried that we won't have it in a few years' time.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with Francis. I think the London Wine, it's very important that the UK trade has a major wine fair, but it is being, there's so many small regional wine fairs like SIT and the G7s, and there's various different things that are popping up and new groups forming together, which are great. But, it comes down to budget. And as far as the international fairs are concerned, it used to be only Vinexpo. And the world went to Vinexpo in Bordeaux, and it was every 2 years. Now we all have to go to Wine Paris and Vinexpo, Wine Paris and Provine. And as Francis said, the London Wine Fair, it has to decide who it's going to be targeted at. But it was really in the heyday when it was an international fair, and it was here for the new world, especially. That's what made London, I guess, when Australia and other countries came and Chile started coming up, and there were big pavilions for all the different countries. I think the trouble is that wine fairs are in the ownership of people who don't understand that the wine industry has a limited budget, and we can't all afford to go as producers or importers go to all of the fairs. I think Provine and Wine Paris will battle it out, and because you can't have all the world's wines in one fair. It's simply on a 3-day fair. You simply don't have the time to get round. And if wine, I'd love to see Wine Paris become essentially a French wine fair, and then we could do away with all the other regional French wine fairs, have it all in Paris. And then perhaps Provine would be the new world wine fair, as Francis said. That's why you go there. I mean, London could take a step up and become the international wine fair for the new world wines, if it had the investment and the persuasion. But we'll see.
Yeah, I was going to add. I mean, obviously, Provine's great for being clean and organised and being run nicely. But as Italy specialists, I have great memories of those weeks spent at Vin Italy, where as well as the Vin Italy Fair, which is from a producer's perspective expensive to attend, there are also all the off tastings that started 20 years ago, like Suma and the Vin Nature Group, and various other, sort of satellite fairs on the side. There are great fairs where producers can spend, I don't know what they are now, 300, 500,000 euros a day. Oh, sorry, for the fair to be at the satellite fairs rather than having to commit the full Vinitaly price. So that's a great kind of stepping stone, sort of way to be on the side of the main action. And so on a Vinitaly trip, you can do a lot of different things at the same time. And I think a lot of our clients, they view the Loire as being the same thing. You've got Renaissance, and you've got the Renaissance tasting and Le Dive Bouteille at the same time as Salon des Vins de la Loire. So yes, you've got the main annual Loire tasting, but you've got all the biodynamic producers of Europe in the same place for like the one time that happens in the year. So if you're into the top end of like holistic organic farming, then Renaissance is absolutely amazing. And these fairs are designed, like Renaissance is owned by growers, designed for growers. There's the group, and they invite people that they like to join the tasting, and the cost is minimal because it's not a profit making business. So Renaissance is spectacular.